Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the session so far. Talking on digitalization and EV revolution. Now we're coming on to our utopian session of the day, international logistics without borders. Would that it could be, would that it were, but it's not exactly, is it? Anyone who was here yesterday, heard us just talk a lot about the disruptions in the international supply chain right now, particularly on the ocean side. And I know in the panel we'll have some questions addressing that and hearing a bit more about how the companies and experts we've brought together here are addressing and mitigating that. But in this session we're also going to talk more cross-border as well, intra-North America. Perhaps that's, as I think we'll discuss, facing less disruption than on the ocean side, but nonetheless, there's truck driver shortages, as you know about, trades, issues, of course, customs procedures and changes to keep up with, and are not always as optimized as they could be. So there's lots of topics, and we know that the automotive supply chain in North America depends on efficient, smooth, cross-border and international logistics flows, even as we hear more about local for local and regionalization. As we know, none of that happens overnight, and even where it does, it can sometimes move other challenges, not least where we have labor and truck driver shortages here in North America as well. Let me introduce our esteemed panel to you. Very pleased, starting from your left, Agustin Sustaita, Managing Director for TLE, Transportes, Logisticos, Especializados, apologies for that, Mexico, a partner of D-Troy, together an important cross-border operation in North America amongst other services. Welcome back, Adam Pieniazek, the Senior Manager Logistics North America at Magna Powertrain. Always great to have you with us, Adam. And also joining us, Philippe Grinstein, Director of Strategy and Business Development for CNW Courier Network, an important priority freight and premium freight company, especially operating in automotive. So a great mix of manufacturers, also logistics expertise. I'm going to ask Agustin to kick us off. We have a couple of slides to set the scene, give us some context for the international logistics situation, and then we'll go into Q&A. For those of you, again, watching at home or in the office online, remember you can put your questions through via the app, as well as those in the audience. You go into the app, click on the session, you'll see the option for Q&A. Put your questions through there. Agustin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher. Good morning, everyone. Well, we wanted to share with you a glance of what we have been developing so that we can be more agile in the border crossing processes and situation that has been so far nowadays with this post-COVID-19 era. And if we can go to the other slide, I can show you the next one, that one. We're given this Bridging Borders agile door-to-door solution because we are seeing that the congestion in the U.S. ports have been increasing, and for that reason we came out with an idea that we can have a reroute process so that the vessels can go to a Mexico port, and from Mexico we can do the entire process up to the U.S. And with this strategic alliance between D-Troy Logistics, which is the American firm that can do the process in the U.S. side, we as TLE can do the other part in the Mexico standpoint, and that's how we can go from the ports in Mexico to any destination here in the U.S. And that has been a very value advantage for our customers that have performed this feature now that we have. So either if you can have a ready container to go directly to the US, we can go and do that with D-Troy Logistics. Or if you can, if you need to have some consolidation, we can do that in Moderator, which is 2 hours from the border and has the infrastructure in terms of technology and the yards, etc. We have a cross dock there in which we can do this consolidation, the transloading of the containers to a D-Troy trailer and truck, and from Monterey we can go up all the way to the US. So this has been a pretty advantage in terms of lead times, in terms of touches of the product, and that has been also, an advantage in terms of safety and security and avoiding theft actually as well. So this is a pretty robust development that could be an option for any import-export, in this case, going northbound for the US. And if we can go to the next one, please. This is an overall picture of what we are doing with the D-Troy TLE logistics solution in the door-to-door service. Because as we all know, the border crossing processes are congested, for example, through Laredo, which is the main port of the cross-border processes. It is a real struggling there in terms of time, in terms of drayage capacity, in terms of all the clearance that has to be done, documentation side, etc. So the way we are focusing and avoiding that part is that we develop this door-to-door solution in which we are concentrated in B1 drivers, international drivers that can go from Mexico to the US back and forth, and double plates, trucks and trailers, so that we can have just 2 touches of the product in the shipper location and in the final destination. So this way we can be more agile and in terms of lead times, and also we can have an easier way of having the communication and the point of contact for the customers, because they only have one point of contact, in this case with the D-Troy Logistics group. And that has been easier for our customers to track the product and to see where their shipments are. And this has also given an advantage in terms of even inventories, because of the lead times that are more accurate and less time than the usual traditional way of having the cross-border process. And also for the communication standpoint, well, this has also been developing in the technological way of having this information to the customer at any time, and in terms of safety and security as well. And this is all governed by a quality system that will ensure that everything that has been going on the process will be accurate, reliable, and that could be documented for the customer in any requirement that they have. So this entire model, as I mentioned, has become a pretty good advantage for the customers. They have really liked it so far, and we think that this could be a new way of avoiding or combating the situation that has been around the cross-border processes.
Okay, thank you, Agustin. Appreciate sharing that solution. I want to open up for discussion now. I want to kind of start with you. I mean, yesterday we did hear from. In fact, we heard from several tier ones as well around the disruption processes that they're taking to mitigate it. I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit from Magna's point of view, where you're feeling the strongest impacts right now on the international logistics side, and what some of your top priorities in terms of mitigating that.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. So for Magna Powertrain specifically, the biggest challenge has been the overseas suppliers. Cost is probably the biggest headache, followed by the serviceability and the consistency or lack of consistency due to delays. So we've been spending a tremendous amount of time trying to do everything we can to figure out how to put more widgets in each container to minimize that cost. We continue to be flexible in our approach. We kind of use the philosophy of figure out how to get it into North America and then half the battle is over, and then we can figure out how to get it to where it needs to go. So there's been a lot of effort, especially over 21, in order to achieve that.
Into North America, though, might want to avoid Long Beach at the moment. Might be waiting a little bit longer.
Valid point. We are seeing, for example, the supply chain is normally set up where there's we'll call it a schedule or a routine of what we're comfortable with. This year we've had to be much more flexible to say, okay, maybe Ningbo or Shanghai is not the port, even though it always has been. So where can we ship it from? And also, where's the arriving port? Generally, with my largest division in North America is in Mexico. So we do have some advantages in Mexico. The costs aren't as crazy as in the US or even in Canada. So we are looking. But we oftentimes have to think differently in order to be successful. We do use Houston because we're close to Monterrey, Mexico, and it's really been overseas. The interesting thing is Magna Powertrain does use a 3PL model. Our largest facility is managed by ProTrans, and when we talk about from the standpoint of the KPI within North America, they've done an excellent job. The carrier network has been has been a strong partner, and we haven't seen runaway rates. So in North America, that movement has been under control, which has been great. Ocean, on the other hand, I think we're all feeling the pain, and we're trying to understand, is there a silver bullet to fix it? And fundamentally, the problem has been the cost has gone through the roof. It hasn't been forecasted in the budget. No one could predict what would happen. I know someone earlier mentioned it's the Hunger Games, and it's probably that and then some. As a user of the service for overseas, there is a level of frustration. I'm not oblivious to market conditions, but there is a feeling of there's been, I don't want to say gouging per se, but taking advantage of what has happened. And it's not just primarily with the ocean vessels, but it's not just them. And it's been very, very difficult because it is forcing us to really re-examine what we're going to do. Is this short term? Am I going to forget about this in another month or two and everything goes back to normal? Or is this going to be the new normal? And if it's the new normal, then I'm going to make different decisions based on information today, not what I made decisions in the past. And I can tell you, my goal would be if I can have all my suppliers next to my divisions, all my headaches go away, I can retire and be happy. No more stress.
Now, Philippe, I'm not sure you would retire and be so happy if all of those facilities moved next door. But just first of all, some perspective from CNW's point of view. I always think it's interesting to talk to companies like yours because you see things that are happening really, in crisis mode. Probably pick up on some other things which are bubbling below the surface. So maybe you can give us a little snapshot from CNW's point of view right now on the international side.
Sure. Thank you, Chris, for hosting us. Great to be here again. So we've obviously seen a lot of craziness the last 18 months. I'll talk about China a bit because that's where it seems a huge pain point is, and Adam briefly spoke about it. We see a country that obviously is very COVID sensitive. They're very worried, causing many delays. Like if they have a COVID case in a port or something like that, it's not like here in the US where the show would go on. It'll shut down a port for 2 to 3 days. And that coupled with the backlog, and then they had a typhoon recently and things like that. It seems like we've kind of gone through this never-ending crisis, or we're in this never-ending crisis mode out of China. We don't know what's going to happen next, obviously. But what I can say is, and the positive thing is, after being through it for 18 months or however long this pandemic has gone on, I do feel like us and the manufacturers have a lot of solutions in place already. So in future, when there are crises, we're going to be very well prepared, and hopefully they're not as bad as this. I'd say this is one of the most extreme cases we're probably going to see in our lifetime, hopefully. There's been a multitude of very, very creative solutions, like the one Agustin just presented. There's been airlines completely reversing course and changing passenger planes to cargo planes, and just many ways we've managed these crises. 2 years ago, you would have said these ideas were crazy, but now we have those solutions in place. And the good news is, for the next one, we're probably going to be much more prepared.
Yes, and I think we might need to. I don't know if anyone remembers celebrating the end of 2020 thinking, oh, it couldn't ever be worse as that, could it? Well, let's hope 2022 doesn't prove the same. Augustin, obviously you just spoke about some solutions on this side, but can you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of cross-border? Adam said, in a sense, get it to North America and half the battle is done. Tell us about the other battle, because I think cross-borders, post-pandemic, post-COVID, it still comes with some more challenges, I would imagine.
Yeah, and there's several variables that we are struggling with, and the drayage capacity and the shortage of drivers on both sides of the border. And recently the government regulations that have been changing in terms of the import-export processes, the PITA is something that has been also given us challenges to have innovative things to go over that. And that's how we have been developing these solutions and these alliances. For example, with D-Troy, with Unitrade as a custom broker, because we are unifying these innovations and these changes so that we can be prepared for all these scenarios. And to combat all these constraints, let's say, we have to focus on the soft side. For example, in the driver shortages, we have to be more focused on giving them the understanding, making them understand that they're part of the team, that they are one key element for having these processes done. And that's what we've been doing with the D-Troy and TLE in terms of the drivers. And the clearance, for example, we have been working on technology so that we can be more accurate and more agile on having the information for the processes of import-export. And that's how we have been handling this constraint as well. But I mean, there are lots of things around this border crossing, and we have to figure out ways of making solves of all those.
Adam, I wanted to go back to the visibility point, and I'm sure it's come up in every session and every discussion, right? And we don't quite have it where we'd like it. And I can imagine, in some ways, it must even be worse with the variability in the supply chain right now. But at Magna, or perhaps with your providers, have you made efforts to step this up, make improvements, so that perhaps when we're past the worst of this, the visibility will be better?
Sure. So basically, you have to start with working with your strategic partners. And the visibility, in the past, it was kind of like you could book it and then kind of forget about it. You can't do that any longer. You have to make sure that the milestones are being reached so that it doesn't impact the end customer, which is most key. It's really, you find out the strength of your team, you find out the strength of your partners during crisis. It tests your mental, so to speak, to see what you can do, what you can accomplish. Oftentimes, we do the routine because it's familiar and we know it generally works. The last year, it's been thrown into chaos, to say the least, even before that with when COVID first kicked off. But we're always we're challenged at the end of the day to try to minimize the cost impact of logistics. So there's always the term of what's the total delivered cost, why are we doing business with the supplier? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The reason we do business with companies in China is because it's cheaper. If this is the new normal and we're going to have to pay these rates, we are going to look at other solutions because that's what's expected. That's what we're driving for. It's not about, bring everything back to North America or bring everything back to a particular country. It's about, we're in a global economy. We have to figure out what makes sense. And if it continues to make sense to do business with China, we will. If the pain is too great, it will force us to change. We have technology that's readily available. We have, probably more information than we know what to do with. We oftentimes get overloaded, and we're always saying, just give me what I need to minimize the things that are going to hurt me. As I always joke and say, I don't want to see a 5-page report. I just want to see the red, the yellow, the green, so it takes my eye, makes me focus where my pain points are going to be. And if I'm lucky, at the end of the day, I move from red to yellow. And yes, it's important to know this particular green item is fine, and I can look it up at any time. It's there, it's readily available. The challenge we are having is we have the links in the chain, but they're not always working in together congruently and smoothly through the supply chain. And that's the real area that creates an opportunity. Ideally, as a tier one, I would love to go to one person and say, you're responsible, I get all my answers from you. But the reality is that it's so fragmented that we're looking for systems that can easily talk to one another. We know it's coming. Most of it is there. It's just about working together in order to make it more seamless.
Augustin, you've spoken about the alliance with D-Troy, one way to, I suppose, offer more visibility and interface or a simpler interface for customers. Can you talk a little bit about which systems or processes you may be using to improve some of that fragmented visibility that Adam describes?
Yeah, we've been working with, for example, this technology, Samsara, with which we can have the data, the information from all the process of the truck from Mexico to the US, and we provide this information to the customer in any customized format or template that they needed, so that they can have accurate data about the status of the shipments. And we can also develop, we've been also developing this interfaces via EDI or any platform that the customer needs. And we gather around the information from the shipper, the TLE side, D-Troy logistics side, unit trade side. So we have unified all this information into one platform, and we share this data to the customer so that they have this visibility along the way through Samsara.
Question for anyone on the panel. I mean, Adam kind of indicated there, in a way, better to have, or at least to have red, yellow, green. Do we need, or should we have that really, really real-time, precise data kind of, does that bring other advantages too? Anyone on the panel want to take?
Sure. So I actually think we hear a lot about technology, and I guess since I've been coming to this conference the last 5 years, it's been a big point of emphasis. But I actually think the last 18 months have showed us the exact opposite. I mean, logistics and shipping, no matter how much we want to automate and make it real time, is still a pretty old school and backwards industry, and there's not a whole lot that we can do as manufacturers and logistics providers to change that until the ports change, the airlines change, the containers change, the ocean liners change. So I've really seen, like, for example, we have here in Chicago, if you go to the air freight cargo facility, you'll see like 150 containers backlogged like a few weeks. And at that point, it doesn't really help you to have real-time data. Like, it'll just show you that there's a container sitting there for 2 weeks. So really, I think the main thing that helps you get through these pandemics and issues is like close contact, close relationships with the people on the ground in like a very, very old school sense. Like, it's gonna help you a lot more to have a driver that's gonna bring the guy that's actually breaking down the container a pizza or something like that, rather than have a really nice technology screen, which the people on the ground that are working more in an old school sense don't really relate to or don't really care about. So honestly, for us, the pandemic has shifted, because we used to be able to just book, like Adam said, set it and forget it. We book the most premium products like it's supposed to happen. But at this point, everything is backlogged. There's labor shortages. Everything is delayed at every single point. Like I was telling him, each shipment is about like 4 or 5 times more work than it was 2 years ago. At that point, the only thing that's going to save you is like the human connection, and the airline director or the port director or someone working on the ground who's actually physically doing the job, because we get lost in this technology world, and we like to see things on the screen and moving full time. But at the end of the day, it's like someone has to go unload that container, load it onto a truck, and then the truck driver has to like physically get in his car and drive to your facility, which we can't forget we're like in the business of moving boxes at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Philippe hits on a very important part of it, which is technology is wonderful, and sometimes it blinds us with its magic. But at the end of the day, it's a people business. It's about working with your partners, whether they're forwarders, whether they're a 3PL, whether they're your suppliers. It's about challenging one another to think differently. There may be a solution that comes up and you may not like it. Pushing back and saying to the forwarder, can we find something else? It doesn't seem to meet the critical timeline that I'm after. Again, and it's the same thing with the forwarder, challenging us and saying, look, we have a different solution. Have you thought about this? One of the most challenging aspects is the information is definitely not static. It changes. So a solution today may not work tomorrow because everyone has gotten on the bandwagon. So if everyone is avoiding LA now, the question becomes, where are they going? And you may have a competitive advantage for a very short period of time, but that gets closed very, very quickly. Because information, and people keep asking, well, what are you doing? Even within our own structure. We have different groups within Magna. We're communicating. We're saying we're doing this, we're doing that. Who are you using? Do we need to do something with an air charter? Do you have half a container that is empty? Is it a heavy container? Do you have room? Can we mix our freight? What can we do differently? And it's out of necessity. Again, believe me, it's always easier to hit the easy button on the desk and say, bring me another truck. Well, when the truck's not readily available, now I have to be creative and I have to work with my partners to figure out a solution. And again, there's a lot of information out there. But again, it relies on accurate data. I have an ERP system that says it should take me 30 days door to door. And that's how my settings are set. What happens when it increases to 45 and 60 days? It blows a huge hole right in the middle. I have this gap I have to close. And unfortunately, there isn't a really viable alternative that's not very expensive. At least Europe, my European colleagues, they may have railroad and trucking out of China and parts of Asia. It's not as cost effective, but it's an alternative to air. So again, you look at what are the constraints, what are the resources available, what are we talking about, how do we challenge the conventional thought, and just to be flexible at the end of the day and find these creative solutions.
I think the real question is, can we get enough pizza to Long Beach?
Glad I could help.
Pieces on Philippe. Augustin, can we talk a little bit about the driver shortage and what, particularly as relates to the border, perhaps, and the operations that you're involved with, and what your company, and perhaps together with D-Troy, how you are addressing that, whether that's to attract drivers and deal with the shortage, or indeed to mitigate that in other means.
Yeah, I think the key point is to make them feel in the part of the team, and with that said, we've created a culture for them so that they can have engagement and that they can be really satisfied about the jobs that they've done, and to be part of D-Troy TLE. And in that part, I think one key thing to work with them is to make them be understanding. I mean, what I mean here is that we can talk to each other with, for example, with respect, just to make them feel that they are listened and that they are truly part of something. And developing that closeness with the drivers really have a positive impact. We've working with, the wages and the perks and benefits and all that. I mean, that's part of the equation. But at the end of the day, we've seen that make them feel engaged and listen and all that. It's the thing that has been stronger in terms of avoiding the shortage, at least for our companies.
Mm-hmm. Adam, you mentioned this will drive different decisions, if this is the new normal, or new never normal, as I like to call it. We talked a bit yesterday about inventory and approaches, and again, it needs to come down to the detail. You know that, by part and by region, and that certainly doesn't change. But are you, in principle, let's say, comfortable with the idea that inventory balance needs to change, or may need to change?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you always look at pain and how do you avoid it. And you can argue that technology and innovation normally will address something that is not bringing joy or happiness to someone's life. I think business is similar in the way that, today, we do business overseas. I think you're going to see more of a regional strategy. You're going to see more within North America, Europe, and Asia, focused in on those regions to have the supply chains to offer it. I think the question is going to be, can you do something more as a joint venture into those regions so that you can have the provider of services and products in North America be in those other regions so that they don't have to worry about the supply chain. And it probably will see organizations and suppliers in places like China recognize they need to put a presence in North America to get around this challenge that we're facing today. Because if they don't, then someone else is going to seize on that opportunity and be available. Speaking, again, being responsible for North America and looking at what we've done over the last 20 or 30 years from a perspective standpoint, we recognize that we've used Mexico for a lot of low-cost labor content. We tend to use the United States and Canada relatively interchangeable in the Great Lakes region where heavy manufacturing is. But there's been talk about moving mom and pop shops closer or even into Mexico. And today, a mom and pop shop's $100 million. It may be family-owned business. They may not be looking to expand in a global marketplace, but their technology, their skill set is definitely needed. So now it becomes a question of who do you partner with in order to achieve the objective to be everything to your end customer. Because we're all customer focused. We always want to make sure that we are bringing products and services that bring value to our end customer so that they'll continue to come back to us. And if we don't do that, they're going to go elsewhere. So I think we're all challenged with that.
I wanted to pick up a little bit on customs. Agustin, you mentioned, is it PETA? Could you tell us a little bit more about areas of the customs process that you think are or could be better optimized?
Yep. We've been thinking about an idea to, for example, have a pre-vetted group of drivers with a SCAC code instead of having individual process or documents per driver, because as Adam was mentioning, I mean, everything is changing so fast and because of the variables and all that. So nowadays with this PETA process that is all tied to a individual documentation information, if we have this pre-vetted group that can be flexible in terms of at the end of the shipment, what is the data, the specific data to be used. This will help to avoid this congestion and this documentation jamming that is now because of this regulation of PETA, for example. So if we go further in this idea, we could be more agile and more flexible in terms of this constraint that is currently happening.
Philippe, from your side, I mean, you're sort of dealing with movements all around the world. In North America, are there areas of the customs process that CNW has also worked to optimize for your customers?
Yeah, actually, we think customs is one of the least painful points right now in North America, or in the US, let's say specifically. You're able to pre-clear air freight while it's in the air. One thing I will say is that a lot of the other countries around the world, definitely including Mexico, have not caught up to that. And there's some definitely very ancient processes around. So it'd be great, especially at manufacturing power, that the automotive companies have in Mexico get together and figure out some way to talk to the Mexican authorities to do that. I mean, and bring them to the modern day. I think that there is a lot of buying power that the auto manufacturers have down there, and if there is a way to get together and use it collectively, that could be very beneficial. And then the other pain point I will say is that you got to have a customs broker that's really ready to work 24/7. Now, everything's delayed, everything's costing so much money to move. It's really a shame when I see situations in which so much effort is spent getting the goods here, and then someone doesn't want to work on weekends, or there isn't a process set up for 2021. It's still based on 2018 or 2019, and then a product sits in customs because the process isn't set up. So you really got to have your I's dotted and T's crossed. But if you do in the U.S., I actually think it's one of the least painful processes for us right now.
So we're coming towards the end. I don't know that we fixed the problems yet. That's but I may have overpromised a little bit for this session. But no, Adam, looking ahead, and I think it came up again quite a bit yesterday. It feels like it's firefighting mode. I can imagine. Well, the impression we're getting is that it's pretty much constant firefighting mode at the moment. But do you have some perspective? Are you looking ahead at areas beyond the immediate disruption, or perhaps ongoing, to where your vision for further improving international flows?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we make decisions based on the information at the time and what we can project with some level of certainty. Those are how most of the decisions are made. If the information is changing and evolving, then I know we're going to take that information and use it in decision making. And it may end up changing our strategy dramatically.
Indeed. So I think that message is clear. If this is the new normal, and I think it's looking like it, we're going to see some significant changes to the shape of the supply chain, the way it works, perhaps sourcing, manufacturing decisions as well. That's all the time we have now. I think this topic will go on, and we'll talk more about it. But I want to thank the panel for their time and input.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.